Genesis 3 and verse number 1. Now Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the backside of the desert, and came to the mountain of God, even to Horeb. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of the bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. And Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush is not burnt. And when the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called unto him out of the midst of the bush, and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here am I. And he said, Draw not nigh hither, put off thy shoes from off thy feet. For the place whereon thou standest is holy ground. Moreover, he said, I am the God of thy father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon God. I've been dealing with the man Moses and the revelation that the angel of the Lord has made to him. And there were several things that we've pointed out, and I'd like to continue and move forward today by the grace of God. You and I observe the fact that up to this point, the life of Moses has been, at first glance, viewed as a failure. What Moses had desired to do in his youth, and that's why, as Paul the Apostle said, he refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. You would think that Moses' desire to do the right thing, Moses certainly, his heart is in the right place, his mind is in the right place. Moses could have fallen into the lap of luxury the way he was raised, and probably would have become one of the succeeding pharaohs in the land of Egypt. But Moses recognized that he was not an Egyptian. He recognized that he was a Hebrew, and he recognized that his brethren, the Hebrews, were under the cruel arm and the cruel hand of his stepfather, and of his step-grandfather, rather. So he drew a line in the sand and did the right thing. And doing the right thing in the life of Moses was much like Joseph doing the right thing down in the land of Egypt. If you have the idea that you're going to receive accolades and praise for doing the right thing, and that you're going to be rewarded here for doing the right thing, you haven't bothered to read the Bible. And for that matter, you haven't bothered to observe just normal life. Do you realize that if Joseph had committed adultery with his boss man's wife, I mean, she chased him for months trying to have a relationship with Joseph. And if Joseph had committed adultery with his boss's wife, he would have never gone to jail. It was the fact that he did not, that he did the right thing. And finally, in that last instance, Joseph spun out of her arms. I mean, she laid her hands on him. She caught him, and he spun out of his jacket and left the jacket in her hand, ran for his life. And she used that jacket to blackmail him. Joseph did the right thing, and it cost him at least 2 years in jail for doing the right thing. Here Moses has tried to do the right thing. If Moses had kept his mouth shut, had gone along to have gotten along in the land of Egypt, he probably would have been a pharaoh. At least he would have been in the government there. He would have had a high position, a high salary, could have chosen his wife from among the most beautiful Egyptians in the land, driven a new chariot every year when the new models came out. But he knew it was right to identify with his brethren Israel. And Paul said that he refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He refused. He turned his back on that. And he drew a line in the sand and identified himself with the people of Israel. And the result of him doing the right thing, he had to run for his life. Here's a man that has a massive purpose and massive force, and yet now he is driven for doing the right thing. He is driven from the land of Egypt. Now, many believers find themselves in this predicament. You try to live right, you try to do right, you pay your bills, you're a good neighbor, you're faithful in the Lord's house, and yet it seems like you go from one trial to the next, from one difficulty to the next. You would think, I'm living for the Lord, I'm doing the right thing, I've not yielded myself to unrighteousness and licentiousness, and yet everything I do is uphill. Nothing seems to move along. I look around, the unrighteous prosper, and here I am laboring under great difficulty. My friend, if you don't believe in the governing providence of Almighty God, you'll lose your mind. You may lose your faith if you don't recognize that God has a purpose and God is working that purpose out. I've said this over and over again, and those of you that hear the radio, hear me say it, but things just don't turn out the way you thought they would. Things in my life have not turned out the way I thought they would. Things in your life have not turned out the way you thought they would. But I do believe that God is sovereign, and I do believe in the providence of God, and I do believe that God will have His way in a whirlwind. And after 40 years, Moses drifting around in the wilderness of Midian, minding his father-in-law's sheep, thinking that his life has been a complete waste, that his life has not amounted to what it could have amounted to, and he certainly did not do what he wanted to do, and that's deliver the nation of Israel. He could have gone along and had a tremendous position, a big salary, a trophy wife, and all the advantages of Egypt had he just kept his mouth shut and acquiesced to the devil and given himself to the world and the flesh, but he did not. But in the providence of God, there was a vision of the burning bush that restored his energy and restored to him his faith. And now he begins to understand a bit that God has not forsaken him, that 40 years in the wilderness and in wilderness wanderings have not been a complete waste of time. The revelation that was given to Moses was more than just the burning bush. It was the burning bush that drew his eye. It was the natural that drew his eye. The miracle is in the revelation of the angel of the Lord. He saw more there that day than just a burning bush that would not be consumed. Now, the failure was not a failure of Moses' purpose. Moses had a purpose with high hopes. Moses had grand desires. My grandfather used to say that every man, every preacher ought to die with 100 unfulfilled dreams. Now, if you're going to aim that high, you're going to have a lot of disappointments along the way. If you die with 100 unfulfilled dreams, that means there's 100 things that you wanted to do that you were never able, providentially or otherwise, you were never able to do. And there'll be a note of disappointment in this matter of 100 unfulfilled dreams. The failure was not a failure on the part of Moses' purpose. Rather, it was a part of the purpose of God. That the man that was driven out of Egypt, that desired to lead the children of Israel free, is the same man after 40 years in exile God is going to use to carry the Ten Commandments back to the house of Israel. And we happen to call that the law of Moses. Then the revelation that God gave to Moses was not for Moses alone. Here you and I are way down on November the 4th of 2025 in this very late date. And I'm reading to you about the man Moses. And I'm reading to you about the revelation that God gave to the man Moses. And we're reading about the purpose of God in this revelation to the man Moses. God was near. God was in that place. And Moses did not know it. until he was gathered to the burning bush, and there the revelation was made. One writer said it like this, and I quote, "There is no revelation for me. My heart, my mind my heart, my mind is a wilderness now. There were little fruits and flowers in the garden of my early life, and I hope to dedicate my life and consecrate my services to God, perhaps as a minister in His church, perhaps in a high calling in the state. But now I have grown confused with new and strange thoughts that rise Circo-like. New things have swept away the old, and have left me no verdure or flowers in their place. I am in a wilderness, and there is no revelation of fire for me." Now, you and I must guard against entertaining thoughts like this. I know that we have a flesh, and I know that our minds are weak, and I know that our constitutions are weak. But you and I need to alter our views. Of course, there's a sense of dissatisfaction in the course of life, and a sense of dissatisfaction in the things that we, in our own ability and power, desired to do, that for one reason or another we were withheld from doing. But you and I need to recognize that a sovereign God knows much more about what needs to be done, and knows much more about your life and my life than I do. You and I should be very careful not to fall into an area of self-condemnation. Moses certainly sat there on the backside of the desert minding sheep, and I would imagine that Moses probably said, I certainly meant to make more of my life than I have. I would have liked to have made more of my life than I have. And sometimes preachers, and they sit down and look at the TV, and they have 25 people in their church. I know, because I preach for some of you. And you look at the TV, and it seems like everything is larger than life. Great crowds, great musical ability, and lots of money, and on it goes. And you sit there and you say, perhaps I've wasted my life. Maybe I have not made as much out of my life as I should have. Some men say, when I meant to be a living agent, I've only become an idle dreamer. And yet God has isolated the man Moses, not only for his grooming and preparation, but also for his protection. Who's to say that if Moses had not stayed in Egypt, he would have died at 50, or died at 60, or might have been killed in an automobile accident, and God had to put him in a place where Moses would be available at 80 to do the very thing that he wanted to do at the age of 40. Now my time is gone. The Lord willing, we'll continue with this on the Bright Spot Hour tomorrow.